Hi, everyone. I'm Blaine Birch, co-founder and CEO at Dryrun, and I'm your host of Turning Point Podcast, stories and strategies from the world of business. And joining me today is Colin Christensen, managing partner of Fuse42, and also a really interesting set of stories through his business life. So thanks for joining me today, Colin. I really appreciate it.
It's great to be here, Blaine. It's always good to connect with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we've been I've known Colin for a while. We've going back a number of years here, so I've got to see some of the really cool innovations and things that you're working on, and I'm kind of excited to hear a little more about them because we haven't talked in a little while, especially with this COVID stuff going on.
Sure.
But before we dive into all that cool stuff that's happening now, I'd like to kind of go all the way back to how you got started as an entrepreneur. Where was your first step into entrepreneurship?
Well, you have written a great book, and I really enjoyed the book, by the way. So I am writing a book. The book is ready to be published now, which is great. And in that, I kind of go back to the beginning a little bit, which I remember very distinctly. I won't make this long because it goes back like 50 years, right? But I was playing in my grandmother's house, and I remember I said something like, I want to run a graphic design business one day, because I was fascinated with art. And it might have been playing with one of those little Lamborghini toys and, saying, I want one of those. And surely, of course, the only way to get that is to be an entrepreneur. Little did I know. So, but I just remember having that desire to work on my own and be my own boss and kind of create amazing big things. And, fast forward 10 years, I started a graphic design company. So I kind of got that out of the way fairly early. By the time I was 20, and then that kind of evolved into where I am today, which is, not even related in so many ways, but a lot of really, really great experiences along the way. So I've always had this passion about how things work, why things work the way they do. My parents ran a fishing camp in Northern Ontario, and so they would work their butts off for 8 months of the year and then take 4 months off, aside from some trade shows, to promote the business. So I worked up there, no plumbing, no electricity, built log cabins, cut ice, dug holes for outhouses. We had no plumbing, no electricity. It was great. So really learned the value of hard work. And I've just always been fascinated with the way business and things come together.
Yeah, that was, I didn't know about and that just makes me want to go. Like, that sounds like kind of a cool place to go fishing. Actually,
it's pretty amazing. Northern Ontario lakes are incredible.
Yeah, that's anyway, I don't want to get distracted. Hey, what kind of fish were it? No, I won't go into that. So you start a graphic design business, and so you're only 20, so you're basically barely out of high school. Did you take any training before that, or you just go like, I'm starting this, I'm hopping in?
Actually, yeah, pretty close. I took graphic design a little bit in school. I was always an artist. I loved to draw, but I was never, as much as I like to draw, I was always fascinated with the way like fonts looked and the way that lines worked. And, like you look at Calvin and Hobbes. Calvin and Hobbes is a beautiful example of layout, right? You've got the way a box around one and then nothing around the other, and then colors and different perspectives. It's beautiful work. So I was always fascinated with that part rather than just the drawing part. And so I literally, it's funny, very early on in the early 90s, I bought, I spent $10,000, got a $10,000 loan and bought a monitor, a printer, and a computer and some software. And that was it. And that took up 10 grand, right? And
crazy.
Right. And it had like 4 megs of RAM, right? Yeah. It was awesome. But yeah, so I started there, and I was barely out of school, but I just wanted to design stuff. I loved that idea of design, and I started getting clients and, started building annual reports and building logos, and it just had a blast with that for a number of years. And it slowly evolved into some leadership positions. And then I took a hiatus into recruiting for a while, which is kind of an interesting term, but all of it kind of gave me that view of the leadership and how things work and why things work the way they do, and slowly just evolved into consulting with companies, and then seeing all the work of my own as an entrepreneur and going, oh my goodness, this is not easy, it's not intuitive. And then by 2015, so that's a lot of years forward, I'm like, I reinvented a way of helping entrepreneurs figure that out. Yeah. Right. And there's more in that, and we can go into detail on that, but that's where the entrepreneur roadmap was born, is this idea of how do I mentored so many companies. I'd be asking the same questions. They'd give me the same blank stares, and I'd give them the same homework. right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, wait a second, I can automate this. And so I put the whole thing on a website, and it became the Entrepreneur Roadmap. We wrote a book, and now it's starting to get international recognition, which is great. But that journey, those things that it takes to be an entrepreneur was something I had to go through several times and bang my head against the wall and bloody my nose and empty my pockets, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, well, that's the one thing that's shared between like all entrepreneurs is, bloody noses. And the more, from my experience, when there's some companies like my first company, when you set it up, it's like, you kind of hang up your shingle and you're making money, and it's, there's definitely challenges, there's risk, and a lot of the risk happens the more you grow, the bigger it gets, the more risky it gets.
That's right.
But when you start getting into the innovation side, like you said, that's where 90% die. It's a totally different ball game. But I'd like to go back a little bit to that is a sort of, so many entrepreneurs I've talked with have had that journey where they're here, they're there, they're in, they're doing this, then they're doing that. And you had like 20 years there of building up entrepreneurial experience. What were some of the, what came after the design business for a business where you were kind of dove in,
Yeah. Okay. So, okay. So we got into design. The design ended up way back in the early 90s, or mid 90s, I guess. There was a company I ended up doing some contract work for. They needed an artist, like a digital artist. We were creating some CD-ROMs. You remember the old Schoolhouse Rocks? We did a CD-ROM Mac game for them, and another one called Frankie's Backyard. This is going way back, and we're educational CD-ROMs. And I ended up getting on the team as an artist, but then I ended up becoming a producer and working with all the different teams and helping them kind of grow. And then of course we got romanced by Microsoft at the time, and they wanted to buy us, and then that fell through, and the whole company folded. And I was just kind of a guy on the side. I was a contractor, but watching that whole evolution and then drop. But it was fascinating to see again how those teams work and how big financing deals happen, how media and all these things start to come together in the big business side, the digital media side. And then I ended up getting recruited to be a recruiter. I had no idea what that was. So then I ended up in recruiting, and then I moved to Vancouver, I was in Vancouver, and I moved here with my wife to Edmonton, and started a recruiting business. And that was great until about 2001, 9/11, right about there, somewhere in there. And of course, that whole thing unwound everything. I took a job as a recruiter and became kind of a top national guy with CNC Global and then Randstad, and we had a whole bunch of stuff there. And then they got bought out. But right before they got bought out, I exited my own company, and we got into a golf training center, a franchise. We bought into a massive franchise. I started learning a lot about that whole realm and trying to figure out what that was.
Let's talk about, because I know there's a lot of stuff, but it's like, I got to dig into some of this, because you had a recruiting business, the 9/11 hit. Like I get that, because, like my experience from 2008, 2009, like that's, really fundamental shift for us. Same thing in 2001, same thing today.
Yeah.
It's every 10 years, 11 years, whatever it is. It's like, you might as well just write go by the calendar for this. But I want to stop you going to, so you started these things, you went to recruiting, and then suddenly now into a franchise in golfing. And I want to dive into that a little bit, because there's, I don't know that much about franchises, and I'm curious a little bit of your experience of, first of all, do you golf?
Well, as a recruiter, actually, I ended up doing a lot of golfing.
Okay, right? I was curious. Okay.
Right, we'd end up getting out on the golf course and talking about business, and that was a good way to entertain clients, and always an enjoyable one. Especially in Edmonton, we have more golf courses per capita than almost anywhere in the world, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, and it's 4 months to golf.
Yeah, I know. Well, you pack it in, right?
Pack it in, exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, it was an interesting thing, because it was one of those pivoting points for me, because I remember going down to, I was interested in business in general, and my boss at the time in the recruiting company was an amazing boss, a local guy, Kevin Gangle, actually. And the guy's a genius, and he was such a great leader. And so he would always push us and encourage us to grow, just grow. It didn't matter in what angle, just grow in the things that you're passionate about. And he recognized that there was an intersection that we would be together. And it might not last forever, but for that time, we're going to do the best we can for each other. So for example, when I left that company, I gave them 6 months notice. Right. And,
Okay.
you know, and I was the top performing guy in that time or whatever, because I knew where I was going. Right.
Yeah.
That's a whole other leadership podcast. But so I went down to LA for a big presentation and learning some stuff. And I ended up listening to a guy, and he talked about this franchise golf thing that was really kind of peaking. But on the way down for 3.5 hours, I was like, okay, here I am, you know, coming up on my 40th birthday. I'm like, what am I going to do with my life? Right? What do I want my life to be about? And I remember thinking through a lot of these things and planning out, okay, I want to do something which really helps people, and really, especially in the business world. I love mentoring. Like, I had loved mentoring. I'd been doing it for a number of years. So I'm like, okay, how do I do that? And then I go, and sure enough, bing, this franchise drops into my lap. My wife and I were already planning a franchise idea, like to take a business and turn it into a franchise. But this one popped up too. And so all of a sudden I'm looking at these two things going, okay, which one am I going to learn the most from? And that's really the thought process that I had, because I want to help mentor businesses in my old age. Which one's going to teach me the most? And I said, well, I could take this business and take it through a franchise, but that's going to be a steep learning curve, and who knows what's going to do. On the other hand, I have this other one that's, you know, looking like it's pretty successful, looking like it's pretty good. Let's go and learn from it. And so I chose that one, and boy, did I ever learn a lot. Eventually, it completely blew apart. We raised $4.5 million. We had huge amounts of success, and it went up. And in 2008, it hit the ground hard, and we lost everything.
What was the business like? Because I usually like golf. Like, I know you said golf, but like, what exactly was it?
And it was a golf training center. So we had down here on Kingsway, if you know, now it's another golf training center, ironically. There's it used to be Luxor Motors. It used to be a Beaver Lumber, all those kind of things. And so we had a franchise. I'm trying to avoid the name of the franchise for the most part, not to say anything bad about it.
Yep,
but so we had a 34,000 square foot building that we were building out. It had, you know, a pro shop, it had a cafe, it had a gym, it had corporate meeting rooms and a bunch of simulators and a green, right? So a huge kind of place where you could just spend the winters and even in the summer go and have meetings there, and just a real event-based kind of geography, right? You could come in and just love golf. And it was a very attractive thing. We had 850 members pre-signed up before we'd even got into the place, right? So it was very, very interesting for a lot of people who did well on the financing and all that. And unfortunately, what happened is the parent company tried to go public, and it did, and then it blew apart right in 2008, right? So that whole thing dissolved faster than you could say anything. And so we ended up coming in with some alternative financing, but then because the franchise parent company was going under, they wouldn't pay us. So we all of a sudden had no access to capital, no way of going anywhere. And I had been, you know, trying my hardest to try to get this going. And then finally we could not get it happening. And so the parent company kind of washed away. It took us with it. We couldn't do anything, and we had to step back, and it was an abysmal failure for the next 3-4 years in my life. So.
Yeah. Well, and it's because, you know, with franchises, the expectation is like, there's a lot of security here, like a lot more security than, you know, and the frustrating part is, yeah, you guys, you actually did it right. You had it successfully, you'd raised money, you had all these people signed up. And then in the end, it's just like the world's worst sort of thing. It flips around and drags you down.
I mean, guaranteed, we made some massive mistakes in there. I know, and again, this is one of those things, right? The way my stats go, just to give you a quick picture of this, 90% of businesses fail over 10 years, right? And the big problem I see is that about 77% of those failures never try again. And so you get this dead stop in entrepreneurship. And frankly, you know, you and I both know that first failure, that massive failure that stings like nothing else, although discouraging, it should cause you to really step back up on that horse and get going again. Yeah. The lessons you've learned from some of the stuff you've gone through, the lessons I've learned from this, I mean, it makes us better, stronger, faster for the next thing. And I wish that we could do something, and this is where the Entrepreneur Roadmap came in, and Fuse42 as well, to help these entrepreneurs get the right footing, the right foundation, so that they can grow in the right way and avoid those needless failures is really what I'm trying to do, right?
Well, and you know, like some of the challenges, like we know with, especially on the innovation side and startups, like you said, 90% of businesses will fail. Of course, you don't know that going in. I didn't know that going in. I'm like, whoo, you know, wow.
Don't tell anybody.
Yeah, let's not say much about that. But you know, like I was just having this conversation earlier today, and it's something I actually want to bounce off you, because the way you're headed, and you're helping with, you know, startups and innovation side, and how you can help improve the odds. And one of the challenges I see, and one of the absolute frustrations I see as an entrepreneur, especially in the innovation space, and what the innovation space is, they're big gambles, big plays.
Mm-hmm.
And we have you have basically all levels of government in probably every country saying innovation, innovation, innovation.
Mm-hmm.
We need entrepreneurs. We need entrepreneurs. We need entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
And what happens, because I know I've been through it, is the entrepreneur ends up putting in their own money, not getting paid for however long, taking out bank loans with personal guarantees, because the banks, it's hard enough to get a mortgage for you know, a lot of people, let alone get money for an idea. You know, it's not like this is a real bona fide business like an idea. And all the government programs, because I've been fortunate to access some of them, they'll help support portions of staff for a time period, and then they're yours. Then they're all on your dime, and now they're paying taxes back to the government. And the entire time, the driving force, the entrepreneur, the only reason that this thing has gotten off the ground, because it's not the idea, it's the slog through the muck.
Absolutely.
And this is ringing true, because I talked with an entrepreneur yesterday, and he goes, yeah, like starting up, he goes, I haven't been paid in I don't know how long, and I got to figure out in 21 how I'm going to support my family doing this. And I'm like, we all know. And so we have people pushing entrepreneurs, you go do it, you go do it, you go do it. The only person that's not supported in this equation is the entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And so it just makes it really hard. And so I start to get a little tired of, you know, we need innovation.
Yeah.
You take the chance, you take the risk, you put your money in, you put your life on hold for several years. And then afterwards, when you're saying most of them don't go back in, yeah, they have the experience. They also have generally a big pile of debt, right? That's just how it is.
And exactly. We go back to that scuffed knees, bloody nose, and empty pockets, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, I'm so grateful that you bring this up, Lane. It's one of the big fights that I have. So I mentioned before, you know, in Alberta, we have about, according to GEM, which is the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, you know, we have about 850,000 entrepreneurs in Alberta at this moment. So that's a lot. That's huge. Now, who's that counting? Probably counting the guy that runs a water truck. It probably counts the guy that might be an Amway distributor. You know, it's not even counting all registered businesses. It's kind of going into sole proprietors or whatever, guys that have a distribution business or an Amazon business. It could be all of those. Yeah, so yeah. It really brings to question two big things that I've been trying to wrestle with. One, what is innovation, right? And two, what is an entrepreneur? Right. Yeah. So my definition of an entrepreneur is somebody who consistently delivers hustle to deliver a solution, right, to a well-defined problem. That's my version of an entrepreneur. So that kind of includes everybody to a degree. And that, yeah, I'll let you come back on that too. But also,
a little different feel, but yeah.
Yeah. What's innovation? Like, I mean, there's innovation in so many different areas. It doesn't have to be tech. And a lot of us when we talk entrepreneurship, we end up getting tied into this idea of tech. But frankly, that's mostly just in Alberta. If you go to another country, like I said, I'm working out of Tel Aviv and Ghana and South Africa and Ukraine and UK and all these different places that have these things going on. You start asking them about innovation, and sure, there's a focus on some tech, but agri-tech, med tech, you know, innovation. Like, what is innovation? I'm talking to a guy over lunch today about worm casings. Right. So, worm casings, how exciting, right? Except,
what is a worm casing? First of all, I'm going to be thinking about that all night if I don't find out what it is.
Okay. Well, actually, worm casings are some of the best things for soil, right? So when worms eat, they basically, everything they leave behind, let's call it that, is called a worm casing. And so they actually take in
worm shit.
Yeah. They take in anything and digest it, and it turns into nutrient-rich living soil. Like, it's really, really high-quality soil. We bought these little tomato broken plants from Home Depot in the spring. We had a bunch of soil, and we poured a bunch of this worm casing on. In like a month, we had 4 feet by 4 feet by 6 feet worth of tomatoes. And thousands of tomatoes, right? And this is so it's very, very nutrient rich soil, and soil will help save the planet. It becomes this carbon sequestering process that we're not seeing a lot of. And so my point is this, that doesn't fit in. If you go to, and again, I don't want to throw anybody under the bus here, but to try to shift somebody like Alberta Innovates, which is clearly a winner out there. I've been funded by by them before for some of the things that we've done, but that fits outside of their circle. Maybe rightly so, but that's certainly innovation, and it's certainly doing some really, really cool stuff. And so, what is an entrepreneur and what is innovation are two questions that we need to really consider and say, how do we fix this so that we can help guys, but also not just start and get going, but how to sustain themselves until they get to the point where it's self-sustaining. Right?
Yeah. And the way like I look at, if I thought of my first business, I didn't feel like I was an entrepreneur. Right. Maybe near the end, we started to dabble. It felt more like I was a business owner, which is great. But I think that the thing for me that when you're talking about innovation, when it's an innovation business, no matter what type of innovation, it's a much, much riskier endeavor. And it's generally much more capital intensive, and it's not, you're not making money the second you're out the door. You know, it's not like I just got some inventory and I'm selling it out the door. You have to build something first. And when you have to build something and test it and research it and fail 500 times before you get it. And it's all about how do you get this thing to growth. It's like you have to build something. And so I guess in my mind, that's a little bit of how I sort of define how I feel more like an entrepreneur, is because it's like, well, you know, we're trying to build something and there's a lot of risk, and there, you know, kind of ass hanging in the wind kind of thing. Sure. And I think back to my previous one where I hung up the shingle and I'm like, yeah, we're making money, you know, which is great. You need both, right? Yeah. But when we're talking about innovation and how we support innovation, to me, why I'm so passionate about that area is because it is really, really risky. And it's really challenging to get people to take that leap. And like I said, sometimes the best and brightest that have gone through and failed, now they know, and they're not going to want to do it again.
This, you know, you bring up, like, I am sure I don't have an answer for this. I have some thoughts. There's actually some really, really good material on this. Brad Feld, if you don't know who he is, but he helped start Techstars, but he also wrote a couple of books, and one of them is Startup Communities, and his newest one is called Startup Community Way. And he talks a lot about this, you know, innovation. A lot of it's tech kind of based, but looking at ecosystems and how they develop and how they build. This idea of, you know, it's been an interesting year because I think we're seeing more people coming into entrepreneurship than we ever have before, partly in a necessity. You know, you're fired from your job, you can't work, you need to do something to create money. And so I go, you know, we have a micro-lending platform as well, just throw another thing on there, that we had a successful pilot project over the last year down in Central America. So you go down into Central America and it's a crap fest when it comes to trying to live a life down there. You can't leave your house. If you go get groceries, if you can even find them, you might get mugged on the way home. It's like a police state. It's a whole different world. And so we were about to fund a bunch of entrepreneurs down there, just, you know, building juice businesses or, you know, some import businesses or little things like that. And we halted everything because COVID hit full on, right? But then I met with like 30 entrepreneurs through Honduras, and I said, so what's going on? You know, and I listened to them and we talked about it and we started brainstorming. These guys are so positive, so optimistic. And we ended up funding a whole bunch of these entrepreneurs. Like, we just had some money in the bank and we gave, you know, $700 to $1,500. We have a 100% repayment rate so far, wow. Right? Like, every single one of those entrepreneurs is giving money back, even though they can barely even survive on their own. But they're meeting needs. They're innovating. They're doing something to try to make money for themselves. We have it very comfortable here because we have some comfort. But to me, what about like the CERB as an example? I mean, you know, political stance aside, there's a living wage for a little bit, right? Is there a way that we could have some form of that to help entrepreneurs get a little leg up? Now, in my accelerator incubator, that's what we're trying to do. We don't give a lot of money, like, you know, but if you look at it for 3 months, you probably have enough to survive on, pay a couple bills, do things like that. That's the time. So the question comes down to starting a business. Can you do it as a side hustle for a while, or can you do it to help sustain? Somehow we still can't give up on our family. We can't give up on the day-to-day activities, but we have to try to interlace those so that we can get to the point where we can sustain. That's a huge question, and I'm not sure I have the answers for it, but I'm trying to figure it out.
It's not an easy, obviously it's not an easy answer at all. And I think there's a certain point where it's just having the appreciation for, I'm starting to think, my thoughts of what is an entrepreneur, because I talk about it all the time, it's probably actually a little bit narrow, right? Like, cause I'm just so involved in this innovation space, but that's not necessarily building jobs and building the economy and all these other, great things. And, but I don't know if there's that appreciation for the entrepreneur, the business owner. And it's, I think people's views a lot of times are clouded. Entrepreneurs are often seen as entitled and rich and this and that and the other, and they all have jets and Lamborghinis. Like, well, 90% of them don't make it 10 years or whatever it is. Innovation stuff definitely don't make it. Even the ones that do make it, the 10% left over aren't billionaires. It's like most of those are just barely survived. And then there's a small amount that actually, I don't know what it is. It's a 1 out of 1,000 or whatever that actually really, really excel out the other side. It's a really challenging road. And I don't think there's necessarily the appreciation for it or the understanding of it, which means there isn't the support for it. It's a really bizarre sort of set of circumstances. But I want to dive into this now because I know like your Fuse42 is an accelerator. We definitely want to get in and sort of talk about that, but I also know you're doing some really interesting, innovative things that I want to talk about and hear about because, so you've taken a lot of this, experience you've had, you put together this entrepreneur system that you mentioned already. But now you're really driving some innovation. And I just wanted to hear a few of the projects you're working on now.
Yeah, it's interesting because, you go back to how you evolve through that journey. And so, we ended up, started the Entrepreneur Roadmap that opened up, I've always been talking with entrepreneurs everywhere I go. And then we, about 4.5 years ago, I got called in to do a weekend event with entrepreneurs. And then part of the problem I think that you were just discussing, kind of tie that from that into this, is most of the ecosystem that exists is kind of top down. It's pushed by the government and different groups saying, we want to foster innovation, right? And so they build these elements that help the entrepreneurs, but we don't have enough groundswell of the entrepreneurs kind of creating and trying to do things. A lot of us entrepreneurs are running around going, hey, we need help, but the government is not necessarily connecting with those things or whatever big institutional kind of ideas. So we've got to filter that gap, right? And so that's what I'm trying to do to a degree with the Entrepreneur Roadmap and with the Fuse42. So 4 years ago, I ended up going and doing a weekend event with a bunch of entrepreneurs, and it happened to be in the hemp space. And so we saw some really, really cool products, and one of them is still existing and actually got shelved for a little while and got brought back in. And people are seeing it and hearing about it a lot right now, which is very exciting. And it's some girls doing feminine hygiene products out of hemp. Okay, so very, very cool, very innovative, and a big world problem, right? Mm-hmm. So Zoom forward, we ended up doing another event, a 5-week kind of cohort, come in, train a bunch of entrepreneurs, get them in front of people. We had guys win, $1.5 million prizes, right? So that was a lot of fun. Zoom forward another couple of years, a year and a half, and we started an accelerator called Fuse42. And we had some cohorts, and we had some great teams go through that as well. Now we've kind of not shelved it, we've kind of pulled back on it because of COVID. We had a building and blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff. But now we're just we're pivoting, right? We're pivoting into this sustainable development goals, right? So companies that want to solve those big problems, like say feminine hygiene products or equality or poverty or things like that, we take those companies in and we give them some of that living wage for a little while and introduce them to some great players, some great mentors, and eventually some investors, and help them grow and scale, right? But we've done a couple of things. It in itself is actually designed to be a social enterprise. So rather than we've got a huge funnel because we want to attract hundreds of thousands of entrepreneurs and help them from all around the world get some training. That's the entrepreneur roadmap. Then we bring them in through an ecosystem where we'll work with maybe 10, but we open it up for a whole lot more to come in and still get some of that training, right? And then we can spin them off and put them all in front of investors and see if we can help them scale. So that's that innovation side. Through this, I get to meet all kinds of people, right? And through one of those first programs, we had a great night pitching, my open mic pitching over beers, and everybody just getting up 30 seconds because I taught everybody, okay, here's how you want to have a pitch, right? Yep. And so we just practiced these 30-second pitches, and we had public in, we had all these people that just get up on stage after a few beers and go into whatever kind of pitch they wanted to. It was hilarious. And one guy got up and said, I want lightweight drywall. And I'm like, and he's, I want lightweight drywall out of hemp. And I'm like, all right, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. Like, I'm not, I'm following the bouncing ball. So we ended up meeting a month later, and I said, what are you talking about, right? And he says, well, listen, fireproof drywall is 5/8 thick, and that has to be because it's a fire burn rate. But he says it's got to be lightweight, and I said, so what's the problem? I mean, I know I have drywall is heavy, so why should we make it lighter? And he said, well, because we have all these WCB claims. Like, oh, that's interesting. So we often spend time talking about the problem, but we miss some of the actually underlying problems that are the real problems. And so they can only hire big, heavy guys because who's going to throw drywall around 2-3 sheets at a time? And they end up going on WCB all the time because it's, so heavy it throws their back out, right? So, okay, now I've got a real problem. So we ended up going around and just asking questions and talking to people. We ended up with about 6.5 million square feet a month committed, right? People wanting all this drywall. I'm like, it's drywall, man. How exciting is this, right? But we put a bit of a crack team together, some engineers. We ended up getting some help from Alberta Innovates, and we funded this early stage project, got an investor on board, and we are building out a new form of drywall that's lightweight, fireproof, mold-proof, and hopefully thinner even. There's a lot of testing to be done still and all that kind of stuff, but we did get some patents. And so I've got one team kind of working on that. Through this thing, again, through the accelerator, we end up I got introduced to a team, and they were working on this solar project. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Tell me more about that. I don't know anything about solar. And there were some balls that were dropped, and we ended up kind of picking some of those pieces up and putting a team together. We got introduced to some teams from Texas and from the guys that are world renowned in renewable energy. I mean, I can't believe some of the guys we have on our team. And with access to capital and all these things, we started funding this $50 million solar project, right? And, because that's what I do. I help fund companies, right? So we put that together, put a team together, and then we all of a sudden stumbled into this other idea. So we're following this weird bouncing ball all over the place and, opportunistic. And I'm pretty good at delegating because I'm not taking on all of this, right? Yeah. And so all of a sudden we get this opportunity to talk to some townships about who want to be taken off the grid, right? And it's like, we can do that. We have renewable energy guys and financing guys from all around the world excited about what's going on in Alberta. How can we help fund that? And so we start talking about it and starting to build this platform that we can kind of, buffet style, pick and choose some of the renewable energy, waste to heat, water, water cleanliness or wastewater management, waste management, solar power, nuclear power, all these different things that are coming into the forefront. And we have this team that is working on solving some of those problems for councils, city councils that want to do this, right? So that's another one of those innovative ideas that are kind of out there spinning out. And then through our accelerator again, we have this where we can de-risk kind of big companies starting new companies. So if somebody's got an idea, this happens all the time, and they recognize that they're not the one to run with it, right? So you don't want to hand it to a consultant, hand it to an entrepreneur. And so that's kind of where we step in, right? So we had a really exciting, a large company come to us in the textiles industry, and we want to build this new product. It happens to be a hemp lyocell, so hemp-based lyocell. And so it's like, oh, what's that all about? And so we got into there. We're helping put some of the funding and the structure together. And we are building a company around some of the first Canadian hemp fiber out of Alberta, right? So these are where all these little innovative ideas, they start trickling in. And I try to help out and start up and turn the flywheel a little bit and see what we can do to get it going. And then of course all my own stuff that kind of goes too, this idea of helping entrepreneurs I reached out to a very large multinational benevolent corporation and said, hey, we do all this great work helping with medical brigades and construction brigades, sending a bunch of volunteers in and fixing things. What if we actually taught people how to fish? Right? And they went, this is awesome. We've been thinking about this for a while. Let's go. I'm like, oh, okay. So for the last year, we put a pilot project together. That's the group in Honduras. And we've been down there. We funded a bunch of stuff. We have an app now completed, and it's about to come out. So similar to Kiva, where we're going to crowdfund entrepreneurs in all these developing nations. We have 68 nations we can start going into. And again, none of it's me. I just kind of maybe stir the pot a little bit, or get things going. But we have all these little cool innovations that are just starting to blow up, and a lot of it has been going on this year, right? COVID. Yeah. If you look back to the Depression, in the 30s, or 2008, or 1999, or pick one.
Yeah, you pick one, exactly. Yeah.
That's when some of the best innovation and best things can happen if you take advantage of it.
Yeah, and that's what we're seeing. The volatility and how quick this hit this time is like nothing I've ever seen. Of course, or probably most people have seen that are alive today. But there's a lot of interesting stuff happening at the same time, and a lot of like what we're seeing in the tech world is it's accelerated by 10 years, and it's still, people are like scattered and they're running in every direction. But as things start to settle down, it'll be like, oh, it's like 2030. Like that's how far a lot of this will have accelerated, which is amazing. This is really interesting, and hearing what you're doing with Fuse42 and a lot of the sort of social enterprises. And I have to say, the episode right before this one was, I don't know if you know David Cree, but he was on my last episode, and listen to that episode, because David is an amazing guy, built up a social enterprise, and is also advises and counsels people on social enterprises. You have to know him. You have to know him. So I'm going to connect you to after, yeah, there's a lot of interesting parallels, and that's something that we want to see more of. Of course, here is helping. Like for us, our mandate is we want to help individuals and entrepreneurs and the small business owners and that thrive and able to thrive, but doing good. Right? Like that's this, it's the sort of this underlying thing that we're really excited when we hear about enterprises that are really doing good and moving the needle. And we're going to need a lot of that right now. We're going to need a lot of that in a year from now, 24 months from now, 36 months from now. It's going to take that long to probably come out of this into some sense of normalcy. We're in kind of the October, fall of COVID. We want to see this innovation happen, right? And I definitely have to connect you guys. So, this has been amazing. It's interesting, and it's familiar too. Talking with entrepreneurs, it's like, well, I started over here, and then there's this zigzag up and down, all around, spinning this, that, the other. It's like, now we're doing this. I just love that. It's so fascinating and exciting, because this is how stuff starts and how stuff gets done. And again, going back to some of our chat before, it's how do we support, and it's great people like you were doing this, helping entrepreneurs with an idea and a vision and the gumption to jump off the cliff and like the proverbial jump off the cliff and build the plane on the way down. It's really exciting to see. So I want to thank you for that. I do want to have you tell us a little bit about out of Fuse42, and if people want to get in touch with you, also your entrepreneur roadmap, right?
Sure. Yep.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about that so people can find it if they're looking for it, especially if they're looking to start up and are looking to sort of dive in. And a lot of you guys listening today you may be down the road a ways with your business, but I know we're all talking to budding entrepreneurs and where can they find you?
Absolutely. Okay, so the Entrepreneur Roadmap it's definitely designed for that earlier stage guy, do-it-yourself kind of at-home program. But there's a couple of interesting pieces to it that really tie in with not only your audience, but I think with entrepreneurship in general. One is we don't compete really on any level. We are a early stage do-it-yourself kind of stuff that the DNA. But a lot of the tools in there are very, very similar to things like traction and scaling up and scale. John Hoffman, all those guys, right? So we're teaching some of those tools. So there's familiar tools that you would probably know if you've run a business for any amount of time. But so they are helpful to not only your business as a larger business owner, but also to those early stage guys, so we can get it right early on and get the right things early stage. But in that, we also plug into a number of different service providers. So if there's people out there that are trying to help entrepreneurs and get them to that next level, I want to be able to plug entrepreneurs into there, because I only go this deep, right? And so I'll give you some of those basics, but then I need somewhere to get them offloaded into the next stage of their journey. And so we're always looking for that. Second of all, we always need mentors. So we have a pretty unique mentoring program. One is that it's like $4.90 to be a part of my network in general. But we do some training for mentors, because there's a lot of people that want to mentor, but they don't have a framework. And so we've actually created a little bit of a small framework, again, similar to what maybe Traction might do. You could be a Traction facilitator for a lot of money. But ours is like $250, right? But we also, what we do is anybody that you sign up as an entrepreneur, you get a portion of some of that, right? So there's this kind of an affiliate style program. But also even within Fuse42 and some of the work, we're actually doing a little bit of work with McEwen. We had just launched a thing called the McEwen Venture Lab, a brand new program, early stage entrepreneurs, getting them up and ready and teaching them what entrepreneurship is all about. And then we're spending probably 3 months mentoring them. And then they're going to have a big demo day in March, right? So I need mentors. Anybody that wants to mentor with that, I would encourage them to sign up at ECO, like ecosystem, eco.fuse42.ca. And so that's where we have all the mentors and judges and investors and anybody who's interested in seeing some of the deal flow that we have going on or helping out with the ecosystem of building up these entrepreneurs. Love you to be there too, Blaine. We're going to need a bunch of them starting in December. So So fuse42.ca, sorry. Fuse42.ca and then eco.fuse42.ca. As an entrepreneur, it's company.fuse42.ca, and that you can register as a company. And then the other side is the entrepreneurroadmap.ca. So just entrepreneurroadmap.ca.
Okay. And I know like this was, you're talking about McEwen, Edmonton College, because we have people across the globe listen to us here. But it sounds like you're also helping businesses across the globe. You've talked about businesses all over the place. So I do want to encourage you guys that this is not just like definitely not Edmonton or Alberta or Canada. This is a global global thing. And I've seen some of the entrepreneur roadmap stuff, and this is relevant stuff. Everybody needs to go. No matter where you are across the globe. And you mentioned Traction, and it's also, we're a really big fan of Traction and that system, and have had some really great results with that as well. So very big proponent of building some systems that work and processes that work so that it frees you to drive the business forward. So
exactly. No, that's and of course you can post my email or website, but just those are the two best places to get find out what's going on out there anyway.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much, Colin. This was awesome catching up. And like I said, I was excited to hear some of these new initiatives. I heard of like a little bit here and there, but some of them are brand new. So that was, it's being shut in for the last 6 months or 8 months or whatever we're at now. It's amazing how much sort of conversation it stops. Like I'm on Zoom all day, every day, but you kind of miss the, let's go grab a beer or a bite or whatever, and sit down and chat over these things. And it's been missing a little bit of that. So I'm so glad we got to catch up today.
Me too. Absolutely, Blaine. I love watching what you're doing. I'm a big fan of that stuff. It's exciting to see this part. I didn't actually know about this. So very cool to see this going, and anything I can do to help promote it as well would be encouraging.
Oh, really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for listening today. As always, I want to mention, I'm co-founder CEO at Dryrun and dryrun.com. You can visit us there if you're looking for some help on your cash flow management. That's what we're all about. And we know cash flow is obviously a really big need right now. And if you're a CPA, CFOs that are doing some fractional advisory, we also have some really terrific partner programs that might just suit you really well. So please visit us there and chat us up. Thanks so much, everyone.